My son was seconds away from getting my kidney when my granddaughter revealed a shocking secret. "Grandma, stop! You can't do this." My 17-year-old granddaughter Emma comes bursting through the hospital corridor doors, tears streaming down her face, her voice echoing off the sterile white walls. "I know what he did. He killed my mom, Grandma. He killed your daughter, and he's been lying about it for 3 years." The entire world goes silent. The medical team freezes mid-step. My son David, sitting in his wheelchair beside my gurney, goes completely white, like all the blood has drained from his body in an instant. And me? I'm lying on this hospital gurney in my surgical gown, IV already in my arm, literally seconds away from being wheeled into the operating room to give my kidney to my dying son. At 65 years old, I was about to cut myself open to save the son I've loved for 42 years. But now Emma is screaming words that sound impossible. Words that make no sense. Words that are about to destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. "Emma, what are you talking about?" I whisper, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my own heart. Emma collapses to her knees beside my gurney, sobbing so hard her whole body is shaking. She's clutching a backpack to her chest like it contains the secrets of the universe. "I found proof, Grandma. I found everything. The laptop bag from the accident, the phone, the messages, the voice recording where he confesses to killing her. All of it. He's been lying to us for 3 years, and you were about to die on that operating table to save a murderer." I look at David. His face has gone from white to gray. His hands are trembling, and in his eyes I see something that terrifies me more than Emma's words ever could. Guilt. Not surprising. Not confusion. Not outrage at being falsely accused. Just pure, undeniable guilt. And at that moment, I knew. My granddaughter is telling the truth. My son killed my daughter, and I was 60 seconds away from giving him my kidney. Welcome back to Auntie Dorothy's Stories. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Your support truly encourages me to continue sharing these incredible tales with you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing from my sweethearts around the world. My name is Margaret Fletcher, and what I'm about to tell you is the true story of how my entire life, everything I believed about my family, about love, about sacrifice, came crashing down in a hospital corridor in California. But to understand how we got to this moment, I need to take you back 3 years. Back to the night that destroyed everything. Back to the lie that my son has been living ever since. Because this isn't just about a kidney donation gone wrong. This is about what happens when the person you trust most in the world turns out to be a monster wearing the face of someone you love. 3 years ago, I got the phone call that every parent dreads. Rachel had been killed in a car accident on Ridgewood Road. She was just 34 years old, driving home from her daughter Emma's school play on a rainy October night. The police told me her car had skidded on the wet pavement and collided with a tree. She died instantly. But here's what made it even more tragic. David had been in an accident that same night, on that same road. He was found unconscious in his car about a quarter-mile away, also injured. The police said he must have been trying to help Rachel, that he'd been driving behind her and witnessed the crash. They called him a hero for staying at the scene, for trying to save his sister even though he was hurt himself. David spent weeks in the hospital. His injuries were severe, internal bleeding, broken ribs, and worst of all, kidney damage that would eventually require dialysis. While I was planning my daughter's funeral, I was also praying my son would survive. Emma, my granddaughter, had lost her mother and nearly lost her uncle in one terrible night. Her father, Rachel's ex-husband, had left town years before and wanted nothing to do with raising a child. So at 14, Emma came to live with me. We were all each other had left. For 3 years, I watched David struggle with his health while I raised Emma and tried to keep our broken family together. David underwent dialysis 3 times a week. His condition gradually worsened. The doctor said his only hope was a kidney transplant. Then, 6 months ago, came what I thought was a miracle. I was tested and discovered I was a perfect match for David. At 65, the surgery carried risks for me, but I didn't hesitate for even a second. "He's my son," I told Dr. Rodriguez, the transplant surgeon. "I'd give him everything I have, But something had been bothering me about Emma's behavior lately. She'd been spending hours on her laptop, asking strange questions about the night her mother died, avoiding David whenever he came to visit. Emma used to adore her Uncle David. After her father left, David stepped in like a surrogate dad. He took her to father-daughter dances, helped her with homework, taught her to drive. He was more of a father to her than her biological dad ever was. But in recent months, something has shifted. Emma would tense up when David visited. She'd find excuses to leave the room. "What if he doesn't deserve it?" she asked me one night, just days before the surgery. "Emma, honey, everyone deserves a chance to live. He's your uncle. He loves you like a daughter. But what if you're wrong about him? What if everything we think we know is a lie?" I dismissed her concerns as teenage grief and anxiety. I thought she was just scared of losing the last father figure she had. I should have listened more carefully to what she was trying to tell me. The morning of the surgery, Emma seemed agitated. She kept checking her phone, pacing around the house. "What if being a family means something different than we thought?" she said, staring at me with haunted eyes. I should have pressed her then. But the hospital transport was arriving, and David needed help, and there were 1,000 details to manage. When we arrived at the hospital, everything moved so quickly. David looked so frail in his hospital gown, so grateful. He kept squeezing my hand and thanking me. "Mom, I don't know how to repay you for this," he whispered. "You don't need to repay me," I told him. "You're my son. That's what mothers do." Emma had been quiet during all the pre-surgery preparations, sitting in the corner with her backpack clutched tightly to her chest. I thought she was just scared about the surgery. I never imagined she was carrying evidence that would destroy everything. "Are you ready, Mrs. Fletcher?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. I looked at David in his wheelchair, pale and weak but hopeful. I looked at Emma, my beautiful granddaughter with her mother's eyes, sitting so still and quiet. "I'm ready," I said. They began wheeling me down the corridor toward the operating room. The double doors were just ahead. In minutes, this would all be over, and David would have a chance at life again. That's when Emma exploded into the hallway, screaming those words that changed everything. "If you think you know where this story is going, trust me, you have no idea how deep this betrayal goes. Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what Emma revealed next will shock you to your core." What would you do if you discovered that someone you loved had been lying to you about the most important thing in your life? Let me know in the comments below. The silence in that hospital corridor felt like it lasted forever, but it was probably only seconds before Emma collapsed into sobs, so violent that her entire body was shaking. "Emma," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "what are you talking about? Your mother died in an accident?" "No, Grandma," Emma choked out between sobs. "She didn't just die in an accident. Uncle David killed her, and I can prove it." David made a sound I'd never heard before, like all the air had been sucked out of his lungs. His face went from pale to gray. That's impossible," I stammered. David was hurt too. He was trying to help her." Emma looked up at me with tears streaming down her face, and I saw something in her eyes that terrified me, absolute certainty. "I found his laptop bag in the attic," she said. "The one the police returned after the accident. The one nobody ever looked through because we were all too busy grieving and taking care of him." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward. "Perhaps we should move this conversation to a private room. Mrs. Fletcher, given the circumstances, I think we need to postpone the surgery." "No." David finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "Don't postpone it. Just let me die." That's when I knew. Something in the way he said those words told me that whatever Emma had found, it was real. We moved to a private family conference room. Emma sat across from David and me, pulling items out of her backpack with shaking hands. The first thing she showed us was a receipt from Murphy's Bar on Ridgewood Road, time-stamped at 7:47 p.m. on the night Rachel died. "Mom's school play ended at 9:15, Emma said. "The accident happened at 9:43. This receipt shows Uncle David was drinking at a bar less than 2 hours before he got behind the wheel." I stared at the receipt. "David, you told us you were working late at the office that night." David wouldn't look at me. He was staring at his hands, which were shaking worse than usual. "There's more." Emma said, pulling out an old phone. This was in his laptop bag. Look at these text messages. She showed me a conversation between David and someone named Lisa. The messages were from the weeks leading up to Rachel's death, and they were intimate. David was having an affair. But worse than that, they were making plans. One message from David read, "After everything settles down with Rachel's situation, we can make our move to Seattle." Another from Lisa, "I can't wait to start fresh with you. No more complications." And from David, sent just 3 days before the accident, "I just need to figure out how to break it to Mom about Emma. Rachel won't make this easy." My hands were shaking. "What situation with Rachel? What were you planning?" Emma answered, "He was planning to move to Seattle with his girlfriend, but Mom had custody of me, and he knew you'd never let him take me away from her. I felt like I was drowning." "David, is this true? Were you having an affair? Were you planning to leave?" David finally looked up at me, and the guilt in his eyes was unmistakable, but he still didn't speak. "There's more, Grandma," Emma said softly. "He recorded a voice memo. I think he meant to send it to Lisa, but he never did. It's a confession." Emma played the recording, and David's voice filled the room. "Lisa, I can't keep lying. I can't keep pretending I'm some kind of hero. I was drunk that night. Not blackout drunk, but I was impaired. I was supposed to pick up Emma from her play, but I went to meet you at Murphy's instead. When Rachel texted me asking where I was, I panicked. I got in my car and tried to get to the school before she had to leave. I was speeding, trying to catch up to her on Ridgewood Road. I was angry that she was angry with me, and I was driving too aggressively. I saw her car ahead of me, and I was tailgating her. When the road curved, I was going too fast, and I hit her from behind. She lost control and hit that tree because of me. I spun out and hit the guardrail, but I survived and she didn't. And now everyone thinks I'm a hero. The paramedics, the police, you, Mom, Emma. They all think I was trying to save her, but I'm the one who killed her. I can't live with this anymore." The recording ended and the silence in the room was deafening. I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't catch my breath. The room started spinning. My son, my gentle, kind, artistic son, had killed my daughter, had killed Rachel, had been lying to me for 3 years while I grieved her death and cared for him like he was the victim. "David," I whispered, "tell me this isn't real." But David just put his head in his hands and started crying. Not the quiet tears of a grieving brother, but the desperate sobs of a man whose lies had finally caught up with him. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered through his tears. "I never meant for it to happen. I was going to tell the truth, but then the paramedics thought I was a hero, and the police praised me, and you looked at me like I was brave, and I couldn't break your heart twice in one night." Emma was watching me carefully. "There's more," she said quietly. "The insurance money. What about it? The money he gave us to help with Mom's funeral expenses? The money he said was from his savings? It was his settlement money from the insurance company for being a victim of the same accident that killed Mom. He's been living off blood money for 3 years." That's when something inside me broke. Not just my heart, but something deeper. I had spent 3 years mourning my daughter while caring for her killer. I had worked extra hours to pay for his medical bills. I had comforted him through his survivor's guilt. I had been willing to risk my own life to save his. And all the while, he knew the truth. "How long have you known?" I asked Emma. I started suspecting something a few months ago. Little inconsistencies in his story. I found the laptop bag 2 weeks ago, and I've been trying to figure out what to do ever since. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Emma started crying again. "Because I was scared you wouldn't believe me. Because I was scared it would kill you. But then when you were about to give him your kidney, I realized I couldn't let you sacrifice yourself for someone who killed my mom. You've come this far. Don't stop now. What happens next will shock you even more. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this story gets even darker. Do you think a parent should save their child's life, even if that child is a murderer? Tell me what you would do in the comments." Dr. Rodriguez spoke up. "Mrs. Fletcher, I need to know if we're proceeding with the surgery." I looked at David, still crying in his wheelchair. I looked at Emma, who had carried this horrible secret for weeks. I looked at Dr. Rodriguez, waiting for an answer. "I need time to think," I said. Mrs. Fletcher, your son's condition is critical. If we don't perform this surgery soon, then he dies, I said. And maybe that's what should happen. I had never spoken words that cold in my entire life. But in that moment, I felt something I'd never felt before, the desire for justice, even if it meant losing my own child. Emma sat down next to my gurney and took my hand. Grandma, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I didn't mention before. My heart sank. What now, Emma? The affair he was having with Lisa? It started before my parents got divorced. I felt like I'd been punched. What are you talking about? I found older text messages on that phone. Messages going back almost 2 years before Mom died. Uncle David was having an affair with Lisa while my parents were still married. Emma showed me text messages between David and Lisa from 18 months before Rachel's death. Messages that talked about David's guilt over breaking up Rachel's family. One message from David read, "I feel terrible about what happened with Emma's dad. If I hadn't encouraged Rachel to leave him, maybe they could have worked it out." Lisa's response, "You didn't force Rachel to make any decisions. You just showed her what real love looks like." I stared at the phone in horror. David broke up Rachel's marriage? It gets worse, Emma said. She scrolled to another conversation. David had written, "Now that Rachel is free, I feel like such a fraud. She keeps thanking me for supporting her through the divorce. If she knew I was the reason she left him. If she knew I was already with someone else." My mind was reeling. David manipulated Rachel into divorcing Emma's father? From what I can piece together, yes, he was already having an affair with Lisa, but he convinced Rachel that her marriage was hopeless. Rachel trusted David's advice because she thought he was looking out for her. She had no idea he was sabotaging her marriage. I felt like I was drowning in revelations. So David didn't just kill Rachel. He spent 2 years destroying her life before he killed her. Emma nodded grimly. He broke up her marriage while secretly planning to abandon her and steal me. When she refused to let him take me to Seattle, he killed her while driving drunk. I looked over at David, who was still giving his statement to a detective who had arrived. He was confessing to vehicular manslaughter, but he wasn't mentioning any of this history. "Emma," I said, "have you told the detective about these older messages?" "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." The detective, Maria Santos, approached us. "Mrs. Fletcher, I need to ask you some questions. Did you have any knowledge of your son's involvement in your daughter's death?" "None," I said. "I believed he was a hero who tried to save Rachel." "And you were planning to donate your kidney to him today?" "Yes. I thought I was saving an innocent man's life. I had no idea I was about to sacrifice my health for my daughter's killer." "There's more evidence you need to see," I told Detective Santos. "Emma, show her the older messages." As Emma showed Detective Santos the evidence of David's affair and his manipulation of Rachel's marriage, I watched my son's face transform from resigned acceptance to complete despair. "Mr. Fletcher," Detective Santos said, "these communications suggest a pattern of deceptive and manipulative behavior that preceded your sister's death. This could significantly impact the charges against you." David looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Mom, I never meant for things to go so far. You destroyed her marriage," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You convinced her to divorce her husband while you were secretly planning to leave town with another woman. You manipulated her into thinking you cared about her happiness, when really you were just clearing the path for your own escape." Emma was crying. "He didn't just kill my mom. He destroyed my whole family. My parents might have stayed together if Uncle David hadn't interfered." "Detective Santos," I said, "I want to make sure David faces the full consequences of everything he's done." David looked at me in shock. "Mom, please. I was going to tell you the truth after the surgery," David said desperately. "I was going to confess everything." Emma laughed bitterly. "No, you weren't. You were going to take Grandma's kidney and disappear to Seattle with Lisa. I found plane tickets in your laptop bag. 2 tickets to Seattle, dated for next month." My blood went cold. "What?" Emma pulled out 2 airline tickets. "He wasn't planning to stick around. He was planning to recover from the surgery and then disappear with his girlfriend, leaving us to deal with the aftermath." I stared at those plane tickets, and something inside me snapped completely. You were going to let me risk my life to save yours, and then abandon Emma and me to run away with your mistress? David couldn't even look at me. I thought if I could just get healthy, I could figure out a way to make everything right. By running away? Emma demanded. Detective Santos was taking notes. Mr. Fletcher, were you planning to leave the state while under investigation? David finally looked up. I want a lawyer, he said. And just like that, my son disappeared completely. The David who had been crying and apologizing was gone, replaced by a stranger planning his legal strategy. As they took David away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one last time. Mom, I do love you. I stared at him and said the coldest words I'd ever spoken. No, you don't. If you loved me, you wouldn't have been planning to abandon me after I saved your life. You don't know what love is, David. You never did. This story isn't over. What happens at the trial? How does Emma deal with all of this? Subscribe right now because you need to see how this ends. Was I right to turn in my own son? Or should I have given him the kidney anyway? There's no easy answer. Tell me what you think in the comments. The weeks following David's arrest were the strangest and most difficult of my entire life. But we also discovered things about David that made everything even worse. 3 days after his arrest, Detective Santos called with an update that left me speechless. Mrs. Fletcher, we've been investigating your son's background more thoroughly. We found evidence that David has been manipulating people for much longer than we realized. The affair with Lisa wasn't his first. We've identified at least 3 other women he was involved with over the past 5 years, all while maintaining different personas. I felt sick. You're saying he's been lying to multiple people? More than that, we found evidence that he was financially manipulating some of these relationships, taking money from women under false pretenses, using his tragic story about losing his sister to gain sympathy and support. Over the next hour, Emma revealed more disturbing details to Detective Santos. She described how David had gradually driven a wedge between her and her father, constantly criticizing her dad's parenting, positioning himself as the more reliable father figure. He used to tell me that Dad didn't really love me, Emma said. He made me feel like Dad was neglecting us on purpose. Detective Santos took notes. Emma, did David ever suggest that you'd be better off living with him? All the time, Emma said. Even before the divorce, he'd joke about it. After the divorce, he started saying it more seriously. I was horrified. He was grooming you. He was preparing you to accept being taken away from your mother. It gets worse, Detective Santos said. We found evidence that David was researching custody laws, specifically looking for ways that a relative could gain custody of a minor if the parents were deemed unfit. Emma gasped. He was planning to take me away from Mom even before he killed her? It appears that way. We found documents on his computer suggesting he was going to petition for custody. A week later, Lisa came forward with her own story. She told Detective Santos that David had been lying to her about everything. He'd told her that Rachel was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous to Emma. He'd said that I was aging rapidly and might not be competent to care for a teenager. He told me that Emma's father was abusive and that Rachel was covering it up, Lisa said. I thought I was helping him rescue a child from a terrible situation. Lisa also revealed that David had been taking money from her to pay for legal fees to get custody of Emma. Money he was using to fund his double life. I gave him almost $15,000 over 6 months, Lisa said. I thought I was helping him save his niece. But the revelation that hurt the most came from Emma 2 weeks after David's arrest. Grandma, the reason I started investigating the accident wasn't just because his story didn't add up. It was because of something he said to me a few months ago. What is it, sweetheart? He told me that when you died, not if, but when, he was going to take me to Seattle with him. He said it like it was already decided, like you dying was inevitable and soon. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. What exactly did he say? He said, Emma, I know Grandma seems healthy now, but she's 65 and the stress is taking a toll. When she passes away, probably within the next few years, you'll always have a home with me. He said it like he was being kind, but something felt wrong. When did this happen? About a month before we found out you were a kidney match for him. My blood ran cold. Emma, do you think David was planning to hurt me? I don't know. But I found disturbing searches on his computer. How long do elderly people survive after major surgery? Complications from kidney donation in seniors. What happens to guardianship if guardian dies after surgery? I stared at Emma in horror. He was researching what would happen if I died during the kidney surgery. It gets worse. I found a draft email to Lisa that he never sent. It said, if the surgery doesn't go well for Mom, Emma and I will be free to start our new life sooner than expected. The thought that David might have been hoping for me to die during surgery was almost too much to bear. Detective Santos obtained a warrant to search David's computer more thoroughly. What they found painted a picture of a man who was far more dangerous than anyone had realized. David had been researching custody laws, surgical complications, inheritance laws, life insurance policies, and ways to disappear with a minor child. He had been planning multiple scenarios for gaining control of Emma. The district attorney eventually charged David with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, in addition to all the other charges. At his trial, which took place 8 months after his arrest, David finally showed some genuine remorse. But it was too little, too late. Your Honor, he said during his sentencing hearing, I know that no apology can undo the damage I've caused. I killed my sister through my own selfishness and recklessness. I manipulated and lied to my family and to multiple romantic partners. He looked at Emma and me. I convinced myself that I loved Emma and wanted what was best for her, but the truth is I was using her. I convinced myself I was protecting her, but I was really planning to destroy her life the same way I destroyed her mother's life. David was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Vehicular manslaughter, insurance fraud, financial exploitation, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and multiple counts of theft and deception. The night after David's sentencing, Emma and I were sitting on our front porch watching the sunset. Grandma, Emma said, I need you to know something. Even though this whole experience was terrible, I'm grateful it happened. Grateful? I asked, surprised. If I hadn't found that evidence, you would have given Uncle David your kidney. You might have died in surgery or been weakened while he disappeared with me to Seattle. We would never have known the truth about Mom's death. Emma took my hand. But more than that, we learned that we're stronger than we thought. We learned we can face terrible truths and survive them. We learned we can be a real family, just the two of us, based on honesty instead of lies. She was right. The months following David's conviction were difficult, but they were also healing. Emma and I went to therapy together. We started volunteering at a support group for families affected by drunk driving, sharing Rachel's real story. Emma channeled her investigative skills into positive pursuits, joining the school newspaper, and eventually deciding she wanted to become a journalist who specializes in exposing corruption. I realized I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. I'd survived losing my husband, losing my daughter, discovering my son was a killer, and nearly being manipulated into sacrificing my life. I was still standing, still capable of love and hope. 6 months after David's sentencing, we got a letter from a woman whose husband had been killed by a drunk driver. Your courage in telling the truth about your son's crime has inspired me to push for stricter penalties for vehicular manslaughter in our state, she wrote. Rachel's story is helping to save other families. That's when I realized that Rachel's death, as senseless as it was, could still have meaning if it prevented other deaths and helped other families find justice. Emma and I started the Rachel Fletcher Foundation, dedicated to supporting families affected by drunk driving and helping them navigate the legal system. We work with law enforcement to ensure drunk driving cases are thoroughly investigated. We also speak at high schools about the ripple effects of drunk driving, about how one person's selfish decision can destroy multiple families. A year after David's conviction, I received a letter from him in prison. He'd found out about the foundation and wanted to contribute somehow. I threw the letter away without reading all of it. Emma asked me if I thought I would ever forgive David. I don't know, I told her honestly. Forgiveness isn't about him. It's about me choosing not to let his betrayal poison the rest of my life. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what he did, or pretending it wasn't that bad. Do you think he's truly sorry now? I think he's sorry he got caught. I think he's sorry he's in prison. I think he might even be sorry that Rachel is dead. But I don't think he's capable of understanding the full extent of what he destroyed. 2 years after David's conviction, Emma graduated high school as valedictorian. In her speech, she talked about how surviving betrayal and trauma had taught her that truth, even painful truth, is always preferable to comfortable lies. My family was built on a foundation of lies, she said. When that foundation crumbled, it was devastating. But now my grandmother and I have built a new foundation based on honesty, courage, and the determination to help others. This foundation is stronger because it's real. Emma is now in college, studying journalism and criminal justice. She wants to become an investigative reporter who helps crime victims find justice. I'm proud of the woman she's becoming, but I'm also proud of who I've become. I learned that I'm tougher than I knew, that I'm capable of choosing justice over family loyalty when necessary, and that love sometimes means refusing to enable someone's destructive behavior. Most importantly, I learned that families aren't just about blood relationships. Emma and I are family because we choose to be, because we support each other, because we're honest with each other, and because we're committed to building something good from the wreckage of something terrible. Would I have chosen this path if I'd known where it would lead? I don't know. Would I have preferred to live in ignorance, to give David my kidney, to never know the truth? I don't think so. Because living in ignorance would have meant that Rachel never got justice. It would have meant David continued to manipulate and harm other people. It would have meant Emma grew up believing lies and potentially falling victim to David's manipulation herself. The truth was devastating, but it was also liberating. For the first time in 3 years, I can visit Rachel's grave and know exactly what happened to her. I can honor her memory by working to prevent other families from experiencing what we experienced. I can look at Emma and know that I protected her from a predator, even if that predator was my own son. As I finish telling you this story, Emma and I are planning a trip to Seattle, not to visit David's dreams, but to speak at a conference for drunk driving victim advocacy groups. We're going to tell Rachel's story to people who can use it to help other families find justice. People often ask me if I hate David. The truth is, I don't hate him. I grieve for the son I thought I had, the same way I grieve for the daughter I lost. But David, the real David, is a stranger to me. I feel sorry for him, but I don't feel responsible for saving him anymore. What I've learned is that love isn't about protecting people from the consequences of their actions. Real love is about helping people become their best selves, even when that means holding them accountable for their worst selves. I loved David enough to let him face justice. I love Emma enough to tell her difficult truths. And I loved myself enough to choose my own survival over my son's manipulation. That's the most important lesson. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's lies, even when that someone is your own child. If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share Rachel's truth and honor her memory. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because Emma and I will be sharing more stories about our advocacy work and the other families we meet through the Rachel Fletcher Foundation. We're not done fighting for justice. And please, share this story with anyone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is remind people that they're not alone in dealing with family betrayal, that survival is possible, and that even the most devastating truths can become the foundation for something better. Rachel deserved justice, and she finally got it. That's what I hold on to when the grief becomes overwhelming. My daughter got justice, Emma got protection, and David got the consequences he spent 3 years trying to avoid. Sometimes that's the best ending we can hope for. What would you have done if you were in my situation? Could you have turned in your own child to save your grandchild? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your thoughts help other people who are facing similar impossible choices. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our stories about justice, survival, and the power of truth. See you in the next one.